All right, as you're filtering in, remember the leaf bricks chart that I had before. You will notice that there are different bricks levels associated with different insects. I was as general as I possibly could be because that first presentation required me, in order to cover every single insect on the planet with every single plant system that is known right now. Now, on this presentation, I'm going to get specific. And because I'm getting specific, it's not going to be as all-encompassing, but I need to zero in on specifics so that you all understand specifically how this works in specific situations. So insect succession is really where this is going to go, and that means you can predict how healthy your plant is based upon the insects and how they succeed as they move and lose interest or gain interest in a particular plant, and how this corresponds to levels of plant health. In this particular example, I'm going to be talking about tree health for my specifics during this presentation. So, if I go through and find the extension forms for many universities, and I get a list of all of the insects that are attacking corn in these particular extension sheets, I get a list of about 30 different insects that attack corn. How many of you have seen all 30 of these insects on the same corn plant at the same time? Yeah, you better keep your hands down, because it has never happened before. This is your first clue to what I just said during the first presentation. Insects are selective. They select when they want to get on a corn plant, and they select when they're not interested in getting on that corn plant. And so even though we may have different groups here, the noctuids, the chrysomela, the beetles, we've got the scarabs, we've got a couple aphids here, they all have a specific reason for being on, in this particular case, a corn plant. They go after a different region of the corn plant, or they go after a certain level of health of the corn plant, but they have their own story to tell. And so because of this succession that we have right here, I'm now going to demonstrate this succession process. And I'm going to do this in citrus. Why citrus? There are two reasons for this. One, I'm from Florida, so I'm very familiar with citrus. Two, the second reason is I've got a lot of data. I have over 100 years worth of data to look at, provided to me by the USDA and some of the stuff on the internet. It took me over 6 months to bring all this stuff together in this presentation that you're about to witness right now, so that you can see the specifics of how this works. Oranges have been around since the 1800s in Florida, but we only started keeping track of it at about 1910 to 1911. The reason why we have 2 years listed, 1910 and 1911, is because we're usually picking oranges in sometimes November, but usually by December when the Hamelin oranges are picked. And then we're picking them all the way through April when the Valencia oranges are usually picked. This is a 2-year process, and that's why we have 2 years listed on all of the subsequent charts that I have listed here. So this is not designed to throw you off. It's just designed because that's the way citrus works in Florida. Citrus comes out during our winter season, not during the summer season. So, as you can see, once they started keeping track of it, this is a list of the number of boxes that were produced. This is times 1,000 boxes, meaning this is 5,000 times 1,000. So this first line here is 5 million boxes. That's what we began with in 1910, or at least close to it, because we were about 3.5 million at that time. But we broke 5 million in just a few years. And so you can see how large the citrus industry is, and that it grows, as many industries do. So we've got, as you can see, from about 1910 to 1940, the citrus industry is getting larger and larger. It's producing more and more boxes. 5 million, 10 million, 15 million, 25 million. We almost hit 30 million boxes just before 1940. It gives you an idea of how quickly the industry was growing during that time. If we do a regression line, you can see the regression line tells us indeed that mathematically speaking, the citrus industry is growing and it's doing very well. We are running at about this time period, during this 30-year time period, about 40 to 60 citrus trees per acre. Why is it so low? I just got finished telling you about 32 to 36,000 corn. Well, that's because a corn plant is very tiny and very thin, but a citrus tree is huge. If you've ever seen a full-grown citrus tree before, it is not a small tree. That's why they were fitting anywhere between about 40 up to about 60 trees during the first 30 years of, the first 30 years that they were keeping track of the citrus industry and how big it was. But things happen, and Florida, it may be a land of paradise sometime, but it's not always, because we do get deep freezes. And a deep freeze occurred. Here's a deep freeze right here. This blue line is indicative of a deep freeze. This was 1917 and 1918. We had a deep freeze, and what happened? We lost a lot of oranges. That's why the number decreased. So from one year to the next, we went down because of the freeze. This cost farmers a lot of money. This was a bit of a concern for them because these freezes cost them a lot of money. However, take a look at what happens in the following 3 years after that freeze. You have massive growth. Why? Because the citrus trees had a break. If you get a chance to rest and recuperate, as I just did a few minutes before this presentation, I can get up here and present again, and the citrus trees had a break. And they come back bigger and better than ever and make the farmers much more money than they would have had they not had this. This is a relatively common occurrence, and we understand how this works. The trees recover, and the industry goes on. It happened again. It doesn't happen that often, but we do get the deep freezes. And another one happened in 1934 to 1935. 1934 to 1935, we have a drop. It's actually a small drop this time. And then the following year, we had more, and then we had, boom, massive, massive, massive growth after the trees had a chance to rest. And that's why we see this 3-year jump afterwards, in this case 4 years afterwards. And so this is the process. You understand how citrus works. And then we had another one, a little close, uncomfortably close. This particular deep freeze happened to occur in 1940, I think it was in January. And so the growth stopped, and we went back down again because of the freeze. This is how things were working during the first 30 years. And this was the insect that was attacking the trees. Wasn't that bad. Scuderia forcata, which is a katydid, a type of katydid in the grasshopper group, was attacking these trees, but it was not causing serious damage. Still, the trees were being sprayed. They had some arsenic and some other things that they were using, and they would occasionally spray the trees in order to take care of some insect problems like Scuderia, which was the pest of citrus during this 30-year period. And still is. I mean, it's still out there even today. Now we go from 1940 to 1980. I had a 30-year jump, now I've got a 40-year jump. Let's see what happens during this 40-year jump. So now we're at a lot right now. This is no longer 5,000, this is 50,000. So we're at 50 million boxes right here, just at this first level. And so you can see that things are continuing to grow. Things are still looking pretty good. But they're not. Because I know some things that you don't yet. For starters, pesticide use began on a massive scale in the 1940s. Why is this a big deal? Aren't we taking care of insects? Well, we're only taking care of insects if they're a problem, right? And we're only taking care of insects because they're our enemy. But if the insects are there, that means there's a problem. So when we start to use pesticides, we actually create more problems for ourselves. What kind of problems am I referring to? Well, I'm referring to the fact that herbicides kill weeds. We know that. But did you know they also kill microbes? That's the side effect. And fungicides kill fungi. They also kill microbes. Different microbes than the herbicides, but they're still killing them. Insecticides kill, insects, but they also kill microbes, different microbes. If you are using all three on your farm, you are doing a fantastic job of killing your microbes. These are the microbes that are putting micronutrients into your plant, that are helping to feed it and make it healthy. You better believe that the Brix is going down when this is being used. And as a matter of fact, it gets a little bit worse than this because I'm an entomologist and I'm aware that we have, in addition to just insecticides, we have chlorinated hydrocarbons, organophosphates, sometimes just called OPs. We have carbamates. We have pyrethroids, sometimes called synthetic pyrethroids. And we also have neonicotinoids, sometimes just known as neonics. I know that you are told in order to sift through usually 3 different groups in order to do what? To stave off insect resistance. That's what you are told by the universities. The reason why is because it does a pretty good job of staving off insect resistance. But at the same time that you are doing this, if you are being circulating between an OP and a synthetic pyrethroid and a neonic, you're also doing a very complete job of taking out specific microbes because the neonics kill different microbes than synthetic pyrethroids, just like the OPs do. And so not only do we have the 3 major groups, but we have minor groups that are doing a good job of cleaning out the soil. I know this. The evidence is very obvious out there. We've seen it before. And so because the heavy pesticide use began, I know that we're in a little bit of trouble right now because it is now being used on a massive scale. Before, it was being used on a low-level scale. Now, they were relatively cheap and they're used a lot, and so they were using them even if they just had a few insects. They would go out and spray the entire crop. This is going to create problems, and it does. Scuderia was somewhat misplaced because Papilio came in. Papilio crescentes, which is the giant swallowtail butterfly, beautiful butterfly, don't get me wrong. It's a beautiful butterfly, but they attack citrus leaves. They like to feed upon them. It's a beautiful butterfly, but it creates one of the ugliest caterpillars on planet Earth. This caterpillar is designed to simulate bird poop. So it gains a certain amount of visual resistance because birds don't want to eat their own poop. But if you agitate it, and you can, it will send out this reddish-orange osmeterium, for which it gets its name, orange dog caterpillar, and this thing startles a bird, and it also smells a little bit. So kids love to do this. My kids love to do that. They go up to their siblings, smell this. They're like, ooh, what is that? And so this odor is there in order to gain some type of resistance. But this butterfly moved in with the advent of the pesticides. So Scuderia was not as much of a problem. Now we've got them, and they were laying their eggs in plenitude. I was even told by some of the old-timers that they would, when they were young, they were told by their dads to go out and pick off all of the orange dog caterpillars, and they were delighted to do it because it was a source of entertainment. Of course, they didn't have PlayStation back then. So pesticide begins on a massive scale. Insects move in, especially the new one right here, so things are starting to be problematic. In addition, we have another change. High-density planting begins. We're no longer dealing with 40 to 60 trees. Now we're dealing with 82. Can you fit 82 citrus on an acre? No, but they were planting them anyway. So we're now going up to 82 trees per acre. This is going to cause stress, as I alluded to with the corn. Why? Well, the leaf canopy is usually about the distance that the roots go to. So generally, wherever the leaves are, the roots can be found directly underneath that. So the roots are generally going to be found in this yellow region underneath the tree. And they will generally not extend much farther than the leaf canopy. Well, not so in Florida. Because in Florida, we have something called a water table. And this water table comes really high to the surface. So high, as a matter of fact, that it can get within 12 to 24 inches of the surface. This is a problem. Trees don't like to put their roots into pure water. And so because of this, the roots don't go that deep. Because they don't go that deep, the roots are now going to extend beyond the leaf canopy because they have to. They can't go deep, therefore they go right and left and they spread out. And that's now the region that the roots are found in. Well, if you've just gone up to 82 trees and the roots are spread out, the roots are now competing with one another. This is going to create stress on the citrus plants. And so, after pesticide use, after another insect comes in, now we got high density planting. What is going on here? Oh, look, we have a freeze. A freeze comes in. This freeze was, let's see, where was it? This freeze was in the 1950s. I don't have this one labeled. Take a look at what happened in the 3 years after this freeze. Do you see that massive growth? I don't see it either. This was an early indication that something was going wrong. The trees were telling us, even though I wasn't alive during this time, they were telling us that there was a problem. So we had 3 years where very little growth occurred. We had to wait until the 4th year before we had a bump up. That's a sign that something is wrong. And of course, we've got many problems developing already. We had another one. Another freeze happened just a few years later, and this freeze brought about the following year, which of course you're supposed to go up, and it went down. First time in recorded history for citrus. Right after a freeze, where the plants, the trees had time to recover, it went down. And then it started to recover after that. That was the second sign that our trees were not doing as well as they should be. So that was 1962 to 1963. Let me introduce our next insect. The next insect is the citrus root weevil. Guess what it attacks? Roots. It's in the name. This isn't rocket science here. Diaprepes abbreviatus, the citrus root weevil, first made its appearance in Florida in 1964. Was it there before? Absolutely it was. But it wasn't a problem until 1964, when it started chewing on the weakened roots of citrus trees. The trees had gotten down to a point where it was now attractive to Diaprepes abbreviatus. So what did we do? Well, the University of Florida came in and said, you know what? We're going to put down 3 pesticides. One, we're going to put down a fungicide. We're like, fungicide? I thought the problem was the insect. No. We're going to put down a fungicide to control Phytophthora. Why is that? Because the roots were now getting infected by a fungus. These weakened roots were now being affected by a fungus for the first time. So they said we need to put down a fungicide in order to control Phytophthora. Then we need to put down an insecticide to kill the adults. Then we need to put down another insecticide to control the larvae underneath the ground, feeding on the roots. They've just added 3 pesticides to a group of pesticides which were being used quite regularly for over 20 years up until that point. We just had a jump, which means what? We're killing microbes, and we're doing it better and faster than we've done before. So this is now a potential problem. We've now got a new insect which just arrived on the scene. This was causing a number of people to kind of freak out. What are we going to do about this? I even got approached at a conference one time. He practically shook me. And I was like, Tom, you need to do something about this. This is destroying the industry. And we're like, wow, this is what happens when people get excited. So we now had another freeze. This was in the late 70s right here. And once again, for the second time in recorded history, we had a drop after the freeze. These trees were not handling the deep freeze well. Before 1910 to 1940, they would handle the deep freeze and recover. Now, for the second time in a row, they're still in trouble. Twice in a row, here and now here, we have a drop instead of it going up. And then the second year, we have a jump after that with the freeze. A third indication, and that's just the deep freezes. We also have Diaprepes, which is also indicating to us that unhealth has been introduced into the system. So that was 1977 and 1978 season. Then we went into the 1980s. This was the first decade where we had a drop. Every single decade up until this point, we had an increase in the number of orange boxes. Now, we have a decrease for the first time. Why did we have a decrease during the 1980s? Well, this didn't help. We got 4 deep freezes in 1 decade. So having had the warmest decade in U.S. history in the 1930s, we were now introduced to the coldest decade in U.S. history during the 1980s. This caused a lot of them to pull their hair out. Some of us are losing enough already, I can't afford to lose any more, but it's a very stressful time in the citrus industry. And what happened during it? Let's take a look. Here we have a deep freeze. See the recovery? Nope, doesn't exist. We have 2 years where the citrus industry is recovering after that deep freeze, and it never did recover, because then we got another deep freeze, which caused another drop. And then we had 2 in a row, which caused a further drop. And then we barely are climbing out of it for 4 years in a row, certainly not reaching what we were at 200 million boxes. And then, bada boom, we got hit with a 4th freeze in 1989 and 1990, causing another decrease. This was the last straw. This is the one that caused a lot of citrus growers to throw up their hands and say, I'm out of here. I am done. I'm not dealing with this anymore. And they left the industry, and we lost a lot of citrus producers during that time. Obviously, this wasn't going to continue, but it certainly looked like we were going to be in some kind of trouble. And there's the regression line to show you that indeed we did get to the point that things started to decrease. But something happened. These successive freezes in the 80s led to the 1989 freeze over here, which, although catastrophic and completely shook up the industry, it killed 6% of the trees. Why not 90% of the trees or even 100% of the trees? Why did it not do that? It only killed 6% of the trees. This is an indication to all of you, good teaching lesson, that plants want to live. And if you leave them alone, they will often do that. But sometimes we do create problems for them. Sometimes it's through an act of God, other times it's through other means, but plants will do what they can in order to survive. We only lost 6% of the trees. Now, we lost a lot of oranges. The oranges do not do well during the deep freeze. But the trees themselves fared out pretty well during that very, very cold decade. And then we go into the 1990s. You may remember the 1990s. Thank you kindly. The 1990s was a warming period in American history. And so this looks like things are on the improve, because you can see that the number of boxes, as I grunt to get this on, that the number of boxes that are being produced has increased. So therefore, it looks like we're all back and everyone's happy again. But we're not, because I know something that you don't know. That during this period where it looked like things were starting to improve, something happened. There we go. There's the regression line, just to show you that mathematically things are improving. But we had higher density planting introduced. We're now up to 115 trees per acre. Question again. Can you fit 115 citrus trees on an acre? No, but they were doing it anyway. So we moved up to 115 trees per acre. Higher density planting. 82 trees, that was a thing of the past. That was so yesterday. That ship has sailed. Now we're moving on to 115, which means you're going to be creating more stress for the plants. Now, when you are getting that kind of density, it's not just the roots that are overlapping with one another. Now it's the leaves. Allow me to introduce our next insect. The next insect to arrive on the picture came in 1993 during this 90s period. It is the citrus leaf miner. It was first detected in Florida in 93. It was first detected in California in 2000. That was a sign that California was actually doing a better job of raising oranges than we are. At least that was the way that it can be interpreted, because they are definitely, they're going downhill like Florida. We're just going downhill faster than they are. The citrus leaf miner started to attack the leaves because the leaves were no longer healthy. They were no longer photosynthesizing and do what they need to, and the next insect moved into the picture. Diaprepes was still there. It just wasn't causing as much damage as it was before. Now the citrus leaf miner was also causing even more damage than Diaprepes. So this is now what's going on. So starting from 2000 all the way to 2022, this is what the citrus industry has done as far as number of boxes. You can see we're relatively high up here, but I know something that you don't know. And that is that high density planting increased to about 150 trees per acre. 150 trees per acre. So the stress that I told you about from going to 82 to 115 is now compounded because we're up to 150 trees per acre. In addition to that, other problems are becoming manifest. Allow me to introduce our next insect. Once the trees got weakened to this point, the Asian citrus psyllid moved in. First detected in Florida in 1998, and it spreads citrus greening. Maybe you've heard about it. It's been talked about a lot in the news. This was the insect that caused, and still causes, a lot of the citrus industry to cower in fear, because this insect has been contributing to citrus greening. It's not the insect that's doing the damage. It's the citrus greening that was doing the damage. This resulted in a dramatic increase in the use of insecticides in order to manage this. So they've stressed out the trees. Now they're throwing on massive increase of insecticides to take care of this, and they're stressing the trees even more because the trees cannot take care of themselves. So this brings us back to the graph here right now. You can see the decline in the citrus industry right now. Did that stop them? No. They then moved up to about 200 trees per acre. It was at the point right now where they realized we're losing money. So what do? We just plant more trees. Of course, the trees are going to get infected because they're not healthy, and that's what's happening right now. Has the industry been saved by this move? Absolutely not. And for those of you who are interested, in 2025, as I stand before you, we're running about 250 trees per acre. And this was an 80-year low. 80-year low. After 80 years of raising citrus and putting the best minds, the best scientists on it, who have suggested so many different things, after 80 years, we reached a new low. Did they deserve the money that they were getting? I would probably argue not, but that's what we had come to. And this 80-year low was talked about in the news. It's embarrassing because we should be going up, and instead we're at an 80-year low. Well, that was blown away the very next year. We went down more than half after that 80-year low. That gave us our brand new record. There was a 90-year low. How proud we are to be breaking these records in citrus. And so then right after that, we had a very, very small recovery, but we are still at rock bottom. This is the state of the citrus industry. This is how a crop gets destroyed over the course of 100 years. Does this apply just to citrus? Absolutely not. It applies to any single crop you can think of. The same thing will occur. This is just being manifest in a very complete way in the citrus industry. This is what we're doing now. These are citrus trees. No, they're not bushes. Some of you think, is this ornamental horticulture? Are you bringing in your dad back into this right now? No. These are citrus trees. This is the density that they're being planted at. These are about 4 to 5 year old trees, and when they grow up, the roots will intermingle and the leaves will intermingle. This is a messed up system, and the insects are attacking it quite readily. Plus, we're putting imidacloprid, which is a neonic, for the first 4 years of their lives in the 2 years in the greenhouse And then after about 2 years out in the field, they will include imidacloprid as a regimen in order to protect the trees against the Asian citrus psyllid. As soon as they stop, the Asian citrus psyllid moves in and introduces citrus greening. We estimate that about, give or take, 100% of the trees have citrus greening, about. It may be a little bit less, but who cares if it's 95 or 90? It's about 100%. So this is what we're doing now. Once they continue to grow into one another, they're just treated as hedges. And they go along and they start cutting them and cleaning them out. These citrus trees are no longer distinguishable as trees. Instead, this is what the industry has reverted to right now. And this is an uncomfortable picture for me to show you, and probably an uncomfortable picture for you to see, being farmers who take some degree of pride in what you do. The new ones, in order to protect them against the Asian citrus psyllid, are being protected. Rather than do something about it, rather than health up the plant, they've given up. We're just going to cover it. And if we cover it, the Asian citrus psyllid can't get inside and it can't infect the tree. Does that work? Actually, it does. The Asian citrus psyllid will not attack a plant because it can't get through this. But what have you done? You've just reduced sunlight to the citrus plant, which means it is stressed. It's young, it's stressed, and you've now put a cover over it. What do you think is going to happen? Well, the health is going to go down. Then we're going to get a new insect. They found a new insect that was climbing up underneath the netting. The Asian citrus psyllid was avoiding them, which they thought was a success, but now they're finding Naipeococcus viridis, which was introduced in Florida in 2009. It's called the Lebic mealybug, the spherical mealybug, and the mealybugs belong to the last group, the aphid group. We are now at rock bottom. We have gotten to the point where we can only start moving to different insects within that aphid group because we have no tree left that actually espouses any type of health at all. So what I've just spent time going through with you in a very specific manner was the citrus industry. Can this happen to wheat? Yes, it could. Can it happen to corn? Absolutely. Can it happen to blueberries? It sure can. No crop is exempt from this. I spent this time teaching you what has happened to the citrus industry. You all understand now what we have done in order to bring this about. I would urge you not to let this happen to your own particular crops. And to be honest with you, the citrus industry has exemplified itself as being the one crop right now that we have destroyed and thrown into the ground. We have not done that with most of the other crops. So here we are right now. The grasshoppers first attacking in the 30s. Chewing insects came in. We had Diaprepes attacking the roots. We had Phyllonestes, which is the citrus leaf miner, attacking the leaves. Sucking insects came in. We had the Asian citrus psyllid coming in. Now in the aphid group, we got the mealybugs that are coming in. You see the succession, the lack of health, how the insects are choosing the plant based upon its level of health and as to what it can actually tangibly digest. The importance of sunlight and the production of high yields of good quality citrus fruit cannot be overstressed. Hello, that was 1978. Why have we ignored that exactly? What was the reason for ignoring the fact that sunlight is important for citrus? Higher density planting pushed the trees to produce quickly, and for the first 10 years we saw some increased yields, like in the 90s. Beyond that, trees grew into one another, and their longevity health was reduced. Citrus trees can easily live for 50 to 70 years. They begin to produce crop by about the 3rd to 5th year, and that's only because of grafting. Normally it would take them a little bit longer. Citrus produces crop every year of its long life, unless we have a deep freeze. Now growers are hoping to get 10 years out of a tree. That's an unhealthy tree. Plus, since the tree will not grow to adulthood, The trees are planted closer together because they've given up. The higher density prevents exposure to full sun. Further intermingling branches compromises the healthy growth as it reduces the leaf canopy. A mature orange tree produces 1,200 oranges. A mature tree is usually in the range of 900 to 1,200 oranges per tree. Citrus becomes fully mature at about 35 years. That means you're not hitting 1,200 until about 35 years of age. That's how long it takes them to get to full maturity. But once they reach 35 years, and if they're going to last 60 years, and they're producing 1,200 oranges each every single year for the final 25 years of its life, maybe longer, that is profit. Profit, let me review this for you, is when you make money from farming. Sometimes I need to remind some of you about how this works, because right now we've become way too accepting of making no money or very little money in farming. Trees are not making it to maturity anymore. Now the average is about 300 oranges per tree. Big drop. It's about 25%. That's about all they can handle. And with some of the trees that are looking right now, I believe that we're closer to the 250 oranges per tree right now. So it's ugly. It's ugly. So that's the situation that we are in. This is the final slide that I have. I just wanted to thank you for putting up with me again through a second presentation. Yes?
You alluded to what time of day it makes a difference to take Brix readings.
1 to 5. Do it during maximal photosynthesis, during the afternoon. Do it from 1 to 5. That gives me a 4-hour window. Starts to fall off after 5 when the sun starts to go down. 1 o'clock, it's usually in full production. The sun is out doing what it needs to be doing. You're going to get a drop in Brix, probably no more than 2 Brix. When I'm testing a tree or a plant, I want it to give it the best shot of impressing me. And it's going to impress me only between 1 to 5. That's why I'm only testing between 1 to 5. Can you test it at night? Sure. Can you do it during the morning? Sure. Can I do it during a 24-hour period? I've done enough of it to know that I concentrate from 1 to 5 because I just want to know what maximal photosynthesis is. That's all I'm interested in. So that's why I do it during the afternoon. Good question. Other question? Yes?
What about during an extended drought when the plant is actually physically wilted in the heat of the afternoon?
If you have an extended drought and the plant is physically wilted during the afternoon, will it affect Brix? It will. There are 2 ways that it'll be affected. One, it'll lower the Brix because the plant is no longer photosynthesizing, and it also raises Brix because sometimes you get a concentration of the few remaining sugars that are in there, meaning you've got a messed up reading. If you are taking Brix readings throughout the entire season, you'll be able to see what the plant should be at, and you can kind of see if there's going to be a dip or if it's going to go up. And this is all information. It's not good or bad when it goes up or down necessarily. That's information for me, and it's information for you. Because during drought conditions, the Brix level will play around a little bit, and it's difficult in order to get a good reading. Very understandable. I got a half hysterical phone call one time from Canada, and they were saying right now, they said, we've got a lot of insects attacking a plant. And I said, what insects are attacking it? So they went through and told me the insects are attacking it. And I said, so what are your Brix levels? They said, we're getting 12 right now. And I thought, okay, something's wrong. So I was talking to them and over the phone and saying, what's going on? And it finally turned out that I was dealing with drought conditions. And I said, okay, so we got drought, which means some of the accuracy is now going to be adjusted. And they said, what do we do? What do we do? And I said, all right, what you're going to do is you're going to choose a plant, any plant that you have. It might have been canola, but I don't remember. And I said, choose any plant you want, get 3 gallons of water, and pour all 3 gallons around one plant and only one plant only. And then you're going to come back 24 hours later, and that's going to give you an idea of what the Brix level should be at if we had adequate water. And then they did. And they're like, holy smokes, went down to 6 and 7. Thanks very much. I appreciate that. And I said, okay, that was a pretty big jump right now. So we had some serious problems with that condition. And so once the plant was healthed up with a little bit of water, it gave us our true Brix reading, which was in that 6 to 7 range. And that's the reason why the insects were attacking it. So the 12 Brix was not real. The insects were attacking it because it was weakened. They're not looking at the quality of the sugar necessarily, they're looking at the digestibility of the proteins. And a plant that is suffering lower Brix, like 6 or 7, is going to advertise itself. The insects will come in and they will start eating it because the plant is already starting to digest itself. Once the plant starts digesting itself, the insects will come in and help continue that process. Yes?
So the corn leafhopper made its introduction to Kansas this last summer. They were a big problem on any late planted corn. I've heard that in Florida they've been a problem on sweet corn for years now, and that Florida farmers have been doing repeat applications of insecticide to try to control them. I didn't know if you had done any work on sweet corn and trying to raise the Brix levels and anything we could adopt here to try to control them.
Yeah, you mentioned sweet corn and possibilities of the corn, what is it, leafhopper? Corn leafhopper that's attacking it. So I'm assuming that's a cicadellid. That would be a sucking insect. So we're in this range right here. Therefore, the leaf Brix is going to be below 9, probably below 7, but it's definitely going to be below 9. And so when you have this situation occurring, what they do in Florida, and Florida has the unenviable honor of spraying an insecticide on corn every single day, 7 days a week. That is an embarrassing truth that we had. And that is done usually in order to prevent some of the other insects from getting in. If they don't feel that like the corn earworm is infecting it, they'll back off a little bit, but there's still heavy spraying that's going on. When you have heavy spraying that's going on, you're killing the microbes in the soil, you're lowering the Brix. This is bringing in the corn leafhopper because the Brix levels are low enough to the point where it's attractive now to the corn leafhopper. So I have taken a look at corn. I'm familiar with the system. I'm embarrassed to tell you what we do in Florida, just as I'm embarrassed to tell you what we do with citrus. But this is what is going on. You also mentioned, and I love the fact that you mentioned that, the corn leafhopper just arrived. I get this a lot. This insect just arrived. In other words, because it just arrived, it's now a problem. It was making a choice years ago not to arrive because the plant was not low enough for it to actually get nutrition out of it. So now that the plants are low enough, the corn leafhopper will now come in and it will start to reproduce, and it will create a problem that wasn't there before. Not because the corn leafhopper is a problem, because the Brix levels are now going further and further down, which is bringing in new insects. And that's what's going on with the sweet corn.